everything. And America being the true old world, it includes, yeah, all these stories about the Bible and all that. What do you think they were talking about? That is the true old world. So I also want to say, not saying that everybody that was here is a lost tribe, so-called lost tribe or so-called Hebrew. Many nations were here, all right? But we're gonna today talk about the lost, what they noticed, right? The lost tribes, huh? Losing a lost tribe. You are the book, all right? Shout out to Visa Breeze, some of these beats.
The evidences of the American Indians being the descendants of the lost tribes of Israel, delivered before the Mercantile Library Association, Clinton Hall by M. Noah, 1837. It is, however, in the religious belief and ceremonies of the Indians that I propose showing some of the evidences of their being, as it is believed, the descendants of the dispersed tribes. This opinion is founded, first, in their belief in one God, second, in the computation of time by their ceremonies of the new moon, third, in their division of the year in 4 seasons, answering to the Jewish festivals of the Feast of Flowers, the Day of Atonement, the Feast of the Tabernacle, and other religious holidays. Fourth, in the erection of a temple after the manner of our temple, and having an ark of the covenant, and also the erection of altars. Fifth, by the division of the nation into tribes, with a chief or grand sachem at their head. Sixth, by their laws of sacrifices, ablutions, marriages, ceremonies in war and peace, the prohibitions of eating certain things, fully carrying out the Mosaic institutions, by their traditions, history, character, appearance, affinity of their language to the Hebrew, and finally, by that everlasting covenant of heirship exhibited in perpetual transmission of its seal in their flesh. If I shall be able to satisfy your doubts and curiosity on these points, you will certainly rejoice with me in discovering that the dispersed of the chosen people are not the lost ones, that the promises held out to them have been thus far realized, and that all the prophecies relative to their future destination will in due time be strictly fulfilled. Again, they're talking about you, that all your prophecies relative to the future, your future destination, will in due time be strictly fulfilled.
Later, many other artifacts would turn up that suggested the presence of Middle Eastern cultures in North America.
Protestant priests, Catholic fathers, Jewish rabbis were seeing these possible links between the Native Americans and ancient Israel. These links included written records that had possible tie-ins to the ancient world.
There were certainly religious beliefs, thinking that the Native Americans may have been descendants of some Hebraic, Jewish, Israelite travelers to the Americas at different times, or of other Old World peoples at different times. And there are various things fueling these. There were religious, political, and social agendas.
Perhaps the largest documented religious artifact was this ancient city wall mound, recorded in Squire and Davis's Smithsonian publication entitled Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley.
So to see an artifact like that, or the context in which they would place an artifact like that, would be, especially something found in association with the mounds, would be, oh, that shows to us the presence of these people at that time here in the Americas. They were responsible for creating that artifact. They were responsible for creating the mounds and for introducing various cultural aspects into the Americas.
The idea that ancient inhabitants knew of and used Middle Eastern Hebrew symbols undermined the notion that Native Americans were isolated savages. It also conflicted with the emerging science of the day.
One explorer took these separate legends and connected the dots. His intention was to sail west from Europe to find the Garden of Eden itself. His name? Christopher Columbus.
Christopher Columbus first and foremost was searching for a water trade route to Asia. But in the back of his mind, as he went on these voyages, he also, according to some of his letters and some of his documents, was searching for the Garden of Eden.
Columbus believed he could reach Asia by traveling west, but he also knew that Eden was on the border of Asia. On his third voyage in 1498, Columbus made a discovery that to him must have been akin to a miracle.
Christopher Columbus claimed to have found the Garden of Eden in Venezuela, in a place called Paria. He saw a set of mountains in the distance and a lush tropical landscape that to him seemed to suggest he had in fact located the Garden of Eden.
Columbus was convinced of his success because the land he found matched every description of Eden, from the pages of the Bible to medieval legends.
He saw the physical signs that to him indicated the Garden of Eden was there. And these signs included the mountain that was partially hidden by clouds, the temperature, which was neither too hot nor too cold.
When he saw the Orinoco River emptying there into the sea, the mass of water so inspired him that he thought maybe he had discovered the entrance to the Garden of Eden. And in his letters written during that second voyage, he indicated that he regretted not being able to explore it further.
In his letters, Columbus speculated that the exotic tropical plants he saw were the forbidden fruit eaten by Adam and Eve.
Christopher Columbus is someone who I believe was capable of enormous self-deception. This is a man who seems incredibly stubborn, and also someone who is not willing to let the facts interfere with what he thinks is right. Columbus did in fact believe he had found the Garden of Eden until he died.
Works of Hubert Howie Bancroft. All right, this is volume 5. The Native Races series he has is a lot of volumes. We actually read from his books in part 2 of our Aboriginal series, Indigenous American to African American. All right, go check that out. Who is Hubert Howie Bancroft? It says that he was an American historian and ethnologist, all right, an ethnologist who wrote, published, and collected works concerning the western United States, Texas, California, Alaska, Mexico, Central America, and British Columbia. All right. Hubert Bancroft collected and published 39 volumes on the history and peoples of Western North America. His work remains one of the great sources of information on the West. Great sources. Again, great sources of information on the West. We read from this on part 2. Go check it out. Again, this is Encyclopedia Britannica. All right, so now we know who he is, right? Let's go back to the book. The Mexicans have a tradition of a journey undertaken at the command of a god and continued for a long time under the direction of certain high priests. High priests led them, right? Who miraculously obtained supplies for their support. Miraculously. You hear this, right? This bears a striking resemblance to the Hebrew story of the wandering in the desert. And who were they with? Moses, right? After the Exodus. All right, another correlation here. This is again from Garcia, another person. There are striking similarities between the Babel, flood, and creation myths of the Hebrews and the Americans. Both Jews and Mexicans were fond of appealing in their adjurations to the heaven and the earth. Both were extremely superstitious and firm believers in prodigies. The character and history of Christ and Huitzilopochtli, again, Huitzilopochtli, remember that, present certain analogies. Right? Christ, they mean Meshach, an anointed one, a Messiah. That's what they mean. They don't mean Jesus. The Mexican temple, like the Jewish, faced the east. As amongst the Jews, the ark was a sort of portable temple in which the deity was supposed to be continually present, and which was accordingly borne on the shoulders of the priest as a sure refuge and defense from their enemies. So amongst the Mexicans and Indians of Michoacan and Honduras, an ark was held in the highest veneration and was considered an object too sacred to be touched by any but the priest. All right, the same religious reverence for the ark is stated by Adair, all right, to have existed among the Cherokee and other Indian tribes inhabiting the banks of the Mississippi, and his testimony is corroborated by the accounts of Spanish authors of the greatest veracity. The nature and use of the ark having been explained, it is needless to observe that its form might have been various, although Scripture declares that the Hebrew ark was of the simplest construction. And again, it would appear from many passages of the Old Testament that the Jews believed in the real presence of God in the ark, as the Roman Catholics believe in the real presence of Christ in the sacrament, from whom it is probable the Mexicans borrowed the notion that he, whom the heaven of heavens cannot contain, and whose glory fills all space, could be confined within the precincts of a narrow ark and be borne by a set of weak and frail priests. Alright, so they're telling you that a lot of Indian tribes had an ark. They went to war with it. It was sacred to them. It was carried by priests. Alright, every time they stopped with it somewhere, they created a tabernacle or a temporary temple for it, right? Just like the Hebrews, right? Starts to hijack with Jews, right? But again, we're in the book The Native Races of Volume 5 by Hubert Bancroft, and we're just more different sources, the same thing, right? We also read in the last part with the Seminole, who also had an ark, all right? If the belief of the Mexicans had not been analogous to that of the ancient Jews, the early Spanish missionaries would certainly have expressed their indignation of the absurd credulity of those who believed that their omnipresent God, Huitzilopochtli, was carried in an ark on priests' shoulders, all right? But of the ark of the Mexicans, they say but little fearing, as it would appear to tread too boldly on the burning ashes of Mount Sinai. It says here, the Yucatec conception of a trinity resembles the Hebrew. It is probable that Quetzalcoatl, whose proper name signifies feathered serpent, was so called after the brazen serpent which Moses lifted up in the wilderness, the feathers perhaps alluding to the rabbinical tradition that the fiery serpents which God sent against the Israelites were of a winged species. Fire serpent, we're talking about dragons, dracons, is that what we're talking about? All right, and see how they linked again Moses with Quetzalcoatl, aka Huitzilopochtli. All right, we got that on the other book. All right. So real quick, just to read the footnote right here, it says representations of the lifting up of serpents frequently occur in Mexican paintings. All right, lifting up of serpents, just like Moses. And the plagues which Moses called down upon the Egyptians by lifting up his rod, which became a serpent, are evidently referred to in the 11th and 12th pages of the Borgian manuscript. All right, you hear that? So they have that in their story, is what he's saying. All right, the Mexicans. An allusion to the passage of the Red Sea. Red Sea, is that the Gulf of California? UB News, thank you for that.
If cartographers of the time were mistaken as to the true nature of California, why were so many maps made with this exact same mistake? Why were the maps so detailed? And if this part of America was discovered after 1579, and most maps seem to depict the island of California prior to this year, why should we assume they are incorrect? Literally hundreds of maps, some not even centered around America, use the same illustration with some incredible amounts of detail. Even the names of islands and settlements in and along this mythical yet supposedly non-existent strait are labeled with astonishing consistency across the numerous examples at our disposal. So, the so-called experts say these maps are wrong. But what if they're wrong? What if we could prove it? Would that mean that California really was an island? And if that was true, is the body of water that separated California from the mainland really the Red Sea? And if this were true, that would mean America is Egypt. The Red Sea is the principal body of water traversed through and along during the book of Exodus. According to most lexicons, the title given to this body of water by the Hebrews was Yam Suf. Yam meaning sea, Suf meaning reed or weed. Sea of reeds. It must be noted that in modern-day Egypt, there has been no significant evidence of a Red Sea crossing, or that Hebrews once even inhabited the area known as ancient Egypt. Not exist in Egypt, for the civilization in Egypt is not the location of the most renowned events of the Old Testament. Their faith will die within these institutions. So how did the name and meaning of the Red Sea become so bastardized? If it really means Yam Suf, Sea of Reeds, why did the name change to Red Sea? This subject has been the target of biblical dispute, mainly because there is no attributed source as to why the name changed. In some circles, historians simply believe the name was changed by the Greek for the appearance of the mountains and the red coral found within. But no one can surely say for certain. Yet it was first with the Greek than did the names of lands and bodies of water become confounded. As stated earlier, the names of places have been changed in Scripture, or at least our understanding of those places. The Red Sea being an example. In the context of the King James 1611 version, the Red Sea is most often referred to as the sea in Exodus, but also as red. However, in the Aramaic Targum, the Red Sea is referred to as the Weedy Sea. The term Red Sea, Yam Suf, or Weedy Sea, is most likely referring to red tides. What is a red tide? A red tide is essentially phytoplankton. Plankton is a collection of various microorganisms in the water that are basically motionless aquatic gels who travel with the currents. Red tide is a particular type in which sunlight exacerbates its red color. Although red tides exist other places on Earth, the most intense area of this phenomenon occurs in the waters between San Diego and Santa Barbara, and of course, the Gulf of California, as well as the Gulf of Mexico. If there were any part of the world correctly labeled the Red Sea, it would be here. Another piece of evidence that fits nicely into the puzzle is another major and often overlooked aspect of Earth history. major catastrophes have occurred over the past half millennia that have literally changed the face of the earth. Yet they have been purposely withheld from the historical archives. One such event was the 1605 flood of California, which was in many ways an earth-shattering apocalypse. Ironically enough, no one connects the revolving extinction level events every few hundred years in California to the supposedly mistaken maps of antiquity.